Hey guys, welcome. Today I'm going to talk about the mythology of the god Mercury. And I'm super excited for this series because it's specifically for you if you are interested in astrology, have a little inkling, you want to know about it. I'm teaching the mythology first because it's so important to know the stories behind the symbols. So I'm going to put a symbol up for you that represents the planet Mercury. It's called a glyph. When you see that symbol in a chart, I want you to remember these stories and I want you to remember why Mercury has certain significations. So usually Mercury we associate with the trickster god, mischievousness, marketplaces, the ability to communicate, relationships, messages, gossip, things like that. And why, right? When I first became an astrologer, I just got this list of like, here's a list of keywords for Mercury. But um, do any of you learn well from like just looking at a list of like keywords? No, you learn better through stories or if it's put to music or a song or something creative. And that's what the Greeks did and the Romans did and everybody did back in the ancient days when they wanted to teach about a spiritual concept or a god or a goddess. So I'm going to share with you the Greek myths associated with Mercury. And I have resources down in the description box below. If you want to know what books that, I learned it from, you can go there, but I'm going to give you like a quick snapshot of Mercury and why it's associated with all of those keywords. Also, if you're not interested in astrology, you just happen to click on this video, you're going to learn some cool myths and some things you probably don't know about the god Mercury, get to know him. So regardless of why you're here, welcome. And I'm just going to do a quick introduction for me and my channel. My name is Valentine Lister. I'm a professional astrologer and tarot card reader. And on this channel, I teach about tarot astrology. I also do a weekly forecast for you guys every Sunday to help you navigate the energies through the week so that you know that you're not losing your mind or you have confirmation that you're losing your mind. That's always good. And I do readings as well at the moment. So you can check me out and learn more about me on my website, valentinelister.com. All right, so I have this guitar here and you're probably wondering why I have a guitar. And so a guitar specifically is not associated with Mercury, but an instrument that's similar called a lyre is associated with the god Mercury. And it's a pretty funny story, a pretty cool story. So the main myth for Mercury is, so Mercury was the son of Zeus and Maya. Maya was the daughter of Atlas, that guy who like held up the earth. And Zeus, who's also Jupiter. He was, the head honcho of the gods. I'll get to him more when I get to the Jupiter videos. And they had this lovely baby. He was in his nursery. He was like super cute kid, right? And so Mercury was very curious and clever. And so he went wandering around because he got bored. So boredom is key for Mercury. Mercury was super bored. He's a baby. And I guess, he was a super intelligent baby. He was super like observant of everything around him. So he went wandering as a baby. Yes, that's what gods could walk around as baby. And he found a tortoise. And he went, tortoise, you're pretty cool. Tortoises were known to ward off like, evil energy. They were good for magic and they were a good omen. But he's like, you'd be even better if I like killed you, cut out your guts and turned you into an instrument. So that's what he did because all Greek myths are pretty gruesome. Oh, also, I didn't mention Hermes is the traditional name for Mercury. That's a Greek name, but I'm going to go with Mercury because I usually never use the word Hermes for some reason. And we're learning about what's in a chart. He'll be called Mercury in an astrology chart. Anyway, so he cut out the tortoise's guts. He found some reeds that were nearby that were growing, like the plants, and he put them along and created string. And he used the tortoise shell as like the outside of the instrument. And then what else did he use? Did I write that down? Oh yeah, he used like a hide of an ox to go over the whole thing. And he created this beautiful instrument that he could just play. I can't play it. I just have this for a visual. Okay, so, he goes back to his crib and then he goes, ooh, I'm really hungry. So he starts wandering around and he sees this group of cattle, and it was Apollo's cattle. And like it was a big no-no for him to eat the cattle, and he probably like knew this because he was super smart baby. But he went and ate all of Apollo's cattle. He was the god of the sun. So if you saw the moon video, that is Artemis's brother. And also it's Mercury's brother because he was a son of Zeus. And so, Mercury, Hermes, he eats all of the cattle, leaves the bones, and then hops back into his crib. And Apollo comes by and he's super pissed. He's like, who the fuck ate my cattle and left all these bones here? And so Apollo does some digging and he finds out it's Mercury. But Mercury is a baby and he's like, I didn't eat the cattle. I'm a baby. What do you think? I'm just laying around. I was just born. Like, I'm not wandering around eating cattle. Like, he sweet talked his way out of it. So sweet talking your way out of things is definitely a mercurial ability, and getting to trouble because you're bored or hungry, doing it and then go, I'll talk my way out of it later. Also a Mercury thing. So Apollo is super pissed, and Apollo is like, I'm not letting up. I know the truth, and I know you freaking ate my cattle. And that's a signature of the sun. Apollo never let up on the truth. So he's like, I'm taking this to the god court, the god and goddess court. So he went before Zeus or Jupiter, and he said, yo, dad, he ate my cattle. I need some justice for this. He needs to get what's coming to him. So they're arguing back and forth. And Mercury's like, I just swear I'm a baby. I didn't do it, right? So also like little bit like there's a little bit of a lying nature or underhanded nature sometimes to Mercury, in a playful way. And anyway, so finally Apollo proves that Mercury ate the cattle, and Mercury always got something in his back pocket. Mercury always has a trick up his sleeve. He's associated with the magician card in the tarot, if you didn't catch that video. And he pulls out the lyre and he starts playing it, and Apollo all of a sudden just like stops in his tracks. He was so angry, but he's like, whoa, that is like one of the most beautiful instruments I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, Mercury, I misjudged you. I know you ate my cattle, but I think we can be cool because you have just created this instrument that just captured my heart and is such a beautiful expression of the heart and of love and of music. And I can bring that to my muses, because Apollo was hanging out with all the muses with the instruments and all of this inspirational music that we all love. And he said, if you give me that lyre, we can be friends and we can be cool. And so at that point, Mercury and Apollo started up a friendship. So this talks about, first of all, so Apollo is associated with the sun. And if you know about the sun and Mercury in a chart, and if you don't know, they are always close together. They never get more than, I believe it's like 29 degrees apart. And Mercury is always hovering back and forth around the sun as far as we can view it from Earth. And so this myth is a good illustration of the closeness of Mercury and the sun and how they have kind of a special relationship with each other. It also speaks to like how, like, so Apollo is the soul. He's the sun. He expresses like the truth of the soul, right? But the soul has to come into a body. And if you also know, like, or if you want to know, the first house traditionally not associated with Aries, it's actually associated with being the joy of Mercury, because Mercury represents the soul entering the body. So while the soul is full of light, full of truth, it knows what it wants, it has to navigate through this world, through this very dark and scary world, and problem solve and figure things out while we're here, because we don't remember this, like, we can't just navigate as a soul and remember our oneness. We have to actually think on our feet, and we actually have to create like physical things, and just figure out things like how to eat, how to create things, like how to find shelter, things like that. So Mercury in the first house in a chart ends through this myth represents the soul coming into the physical world and the merging of that. And how do we make sense of that, right? Because a lot of times as people, we have to lie, we can't be so upfront about what we're going to do because people could take advantage of us. We can't be like, here's all my money because my heart's full of love and I know we're all one, right? You're going to starve to death, right? If you don't find food, if you don't have a job, you're going to starve to death. So Mercury represents figuring out problems and how to find the resources to be abundant. And it can be kind of dark sometimes. It can be a point where we don't always tell the truth, right? And so we have to make sense of that. We have to make sense of how are we a divine soul, but we also have to live a very human life where we do some shady things as well. And it also represents the curiosity and playfulness of a child and boredom. Also, a quality of Mercury, and it kind of speaks to how the soul also is connected to Mercury, is that a lot of times people with Mercury placements see every possibility at once. So I can kind of think of, if you relate Mercury to the sun and the light of the sun, you can think of Mercury as a rainbow. So a quality of Mercury, long story short, is that we can see all possibilities at one time. So if you have strong Mercury placements, you can see like infinite possibilities of things, and you might want to experience or be able to do everything at once because you remember the soul. But you have to figure out how to do multiple things at sometimes what seems like cross purposes, but your soul is calling you to do all of these things at the same time. So how do we merge duality? How do we merge separateness and having our soul call us to do all of these things at once, but maybe they are things that don't quite merge together, and Mercury figures out how to do that so he can see all the possibilities. And bottom line with this myth, I always think of, it's like, how does the soul express itself and navigate through a world that doesn't necessarily support the soul? It's the wilderness. We're lost in the wilderness. And so also with this story, it represents the soul's playfulness when it comes into the world and has to do like worldly stuff. And so Mercury is related to marketplaces and businesses because that's one of the things that you had to do to survive. So the next story does speak of Mercury being quite dark sometimes and using his slick tongue to be able to protect people. So it's about, Mercury placements are about figuring out how to protect ourselves from other people in a very understandable way. So it relates to the story of Io, who's actually associated with the myth of Taurus, which I'll get to that when we get to Taurus. But basically, Io was a priestess of Hera, but Zeus, Jupiter, loved her the most, and Hera was not having it. She liked to torture, basically, torture Jupiter's mistresses. I'll just say Jupiter so it helps when you read the chart. And so she sent this monster Argus to basically terrorize Io, and he always had his eyes on her. And she basically was like going mad because she felt like she was being watched all the time. And she was super paranoid. She was being watched by this goddess. So Jupiter was like, okay, Mercury, I need you to help me out. Can you go and slay this monster Argus? And Mercury was like, no probs, okay? So Argus was this big, scary monster. And Mercury is fine being around monsters. He's like, I can figure my way out. And I kind of like to learn things. I kind of like to learn about like this part of life and that part of life because Mercury gets bored. So what he did was he told stories to Argus. He got along with this demon, this monster, no problem. He's like, hey, what's up? And he told him story after story after story until Argus fell asleep. And then when Argus was asleep, Mercury cut his head off and was able to save Io from that. Hera had other stuff for Io after that, unfortunately, but at least she didn't have to worry about Argus anymore. And Hera got so upset, she put Argus's many eyes, all the eyes he was using to watch Io, he put the eyes into a peacock. So the peacock represents the monster Argus. So it speaks to, like, again, the survival nature of Mercury and the ability of Mercury to protect you if you're in a bind. and to be able to talk yourself out of some dangerous situations. But it also talks about Mercury's ability to help you keep your sanity, to help you to think logically, to organize your thoughts, to come up with a strategy and a plan where you feel empowered instead of lost and instead of like lost and paranoid in the world and like losing your mental health because of all of the dangers in the world, being able to like organize your thoughts and to have real clear-headed thinking. So Mercury is also associated with the temperament. So people with Mercury in a good placement, like Mercury in Gemini, Mercury in Virgo, if you ever meet someone that has that placement, I have two daughters that have that placement, their temperament is like perfect. Like, not that they don't get upset or anything, but generally they're pretty chill. They're pretty happy people for the most part. Because they're able to organize their thoughts in a way that's super comforting, that helps them slay the demon in your minds that like wants to take you down and won't let up on you. Oh, and another thing with myths, isn't a specific myth, but Mercury shows up in a lot of different Greek and Roman myths, where he is a messenger for the gods. Mainly Jupiter, like, is the main, person he sends messages for, but he does that for other people as well. And so Mercury is associated with being the messenger of the gods because he's able to navigate between realms. So he can go down up to heaven, Mount Olympus, come down to earth and go down into the underworld. So it also talks about humanity, right? And being in a body and having to deal with these different layers of your personality. The one that's the spiritual part of you, the part of your soul, the one that gets involved in the world, and the one that's involved, in our darker side, our like demon side, or our dark underworld side, our shadow. And just our ability to navigate all of these different realms as a person, and also to make sense of it in a way where at the end of the day we do have integrity because we recognize this is just a temporary experience, and it's part of the experience of life. And so with Mercury placements, they also are very in the moment and can navigate things as they come up, because as a human being we have all of these layers and different experiences, and also our minds like our can change from one minute to the next because our environment that's always changing requires us to adapt like quickly and to adjust our strategy. Okay, the last story I want to tell, which I love, is a story of Philemon and Bacchus. And I love this because it's like Jupiter, or Zeus, is up in Mount Olympus hanging out with Apollo, and he's super bored. He's tired of heaven. He wants to have some fun. And let me tell you, if people with strong Mercury placements, Virgo or Gemini, you're calling them up when you want to get in trouble and you want to have a good time. Because even though they drive you crazy with all of their tricks, you know they're ones for a good time. So that's what Jupiter did. He came down to earth and he's like, Mercury, what are we going to do? So they was like, I don't know, let's just hang out. So they went to a town, right? And they disguised themselves as just people. So they're going from door to door being like, hey, like, I'm a guest in town, like, want to host me? And hosting your guests and treating them well was a really important thing to do in like Greek and Roman times. You were supposed to take guests in, treat them like family, and not hurt them. The gods really looked down on that, and that's in other myths. Everybody turned them away. People were jerks, and they didn't know that there were two gods knocking at the door. So eventually they found Philemon and Bacchus, and these were two old people, and they were poor, but they were in love with each other. They were like, this is the love of my life. Like, we're ride or die for each other no matter what. And so they brought Jupiter and Mercury in and they hosted them. And then they did kind of like feel like they were special. Like, they had this intuition that they were special and like really important. So they were like, oh crap. So they got out like their best dinner, which was still small. Like, they were super poor. And, they hosted these gods. And so for fun, Jupiter and Mercury were like, you know what? Fuck all those people that kicked us out. we are going to flood the whole town. We're going to kill everybody, but we're going to save you, Philemon and Bacchus. And they revealed themselves and they told Philemon and Bacchus the story. And so Philemon and Bacchus were like, oh crap, this sounds like really bad. But they were like, okay. And so they promised to save them, and Philemon and Bacchus were able to take care of a temple for like Jupiter and Mercury after. They were honored, and then they asked, like, we don't really want to be apart from each other. So Philemon and Bacchus were able to die at the same time and still always be together because Jupiter turned them into a tree that grew out of each other. And so they were together forever. So Greek myths are kind of funny because, like, if a god wanted to honor you, like 9 times out of 10, you were turned into a tree because, I don't know, trees were important. And I think that has to do with like just being remembered, like the family tree having strong roots and a lineage that people remember. So I think that's what that's about. All right, guys, so those are the myths of Mercury. Hope you enjoyed them. Please leave me any comments on what you learned or any questions about anything else you want to know about the god Mercury or the significations for astrology. And if you like this video, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications. Make sure to share it out if you learned something and you think this is cool, you think other people should learn. All right, guys, I will see you in the next video. And the next video is going to be on the goddess Venus. If you like this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified for whenever I release a new video every single week.